Okay, so picture this, right? You're like deep in the South American rainforest, right? Like it's the middle of the night and like this sharp whistle cuts through the air.
Oh, man.
That could be El Pombero.
Hmm.
And that's what we're diving into today, all these stories and stuff about El Pombero. We've got articles, videos, encyclopedia entries. I mean, you really outdid yourself with this one.
Well, he's a big deal. I mean, especially in those parts of South America, like with Guarani influence.
Right, of course. And I think for anyone listening who might not know, the Guarani people are indigenous to like Paraguay and Argentina and a bunch more places, but their history is incredible. Like you can't separate their stories and beliefs from their connection to the land. It's really fascinating stuff.
For sure.
But okay, so I gotta say, going through these sources, one thing that really struck me was like trying to figure out what El Pombero actually looks like. It's wild. Some sources are like, he's short, he's hairy, maybe has some goat legs. And others describe him more like, I don't know, a gnome or something. So, like, what's the deal? Why so many different interpretations?
Yeah. It's funny because that's kind of classic folklore, though, right?
Hmm.
Think about it. It's passed down, it evolves, changes a little bit as it goes from person to person, from village to village.
Oh, okay.
It's almost like that game, telephone. You ever play that?
Right.
But instead of a sentence, you're passing along a mythical creature.
Haha. Yeah, I get it.
So things are bound to get a little mixed up.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. So, is there something, some core idea of El Pombero that, like, ties all these different versions together?
Absolutely. I mean, the common thread here, the one thing that seems to stay consistent is that he's this powerful nature spirit. And he's all about how humans treat the natural world, especially animals. Like, he's a protector, yeah, but he's also a trickster, even some stories say a bit of a ladies' man.
Okay, see, that's what I wanted to ask you about. Like, he's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? There's a dark side to El Pombero. In fact, I think some of the stuff we read even mention him being blamed for people going missing. And that's seriously creepy.
Yeah.
But before we get into all that, I want to talk about some of his more, let's say, interesting antics.
Okay, yeah.
The stuff that makes him more than just your average, forest spirit.
Right. Well, it's interesting because a lot of what he does that seems mischievous,
Yeah.
even cruel sometimes, it kind of hints at this other role he plays as a guardian of balance.
Okay, so he's not just messing with people for kicks.
Well, let's take the whole letting cattle loose thing or stealing eggs.
Yeah.
On the surface, yeah, it's mischief, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of these stories, there's this pattern. He's targeting people who are disrespecting nature, taking too much, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like those who overharvest or just aren't caring for the land. So it's almost like he's punishing them, teaching them a lesson.
So almost like he's enforcing a sort of natural law.
Exactly. There are always consequences.
Wow.
And, that brings us to a really interesting part of El Pombero, his protective side. There's this one detail I read, it really stood out to me.
Oh, yeah.
About him protecting birds.
Oh, yeah. From kids with slingshots, right.
That's the one.
I remember that.
It said he actually mimics the birds' cries to scare the kids away, almost like he's speaking for them.
Yeah.
You know?
That's wild.
It's like he's saying, hey, leave them alone.
That's incredible.
And it really speaks to this idea that every creature has a place, even the smallest ones. They all matter. We're all connected.
Right.
We're not above any of it. We're part of it.
Yeah.
But there's more to this El Pombero guy, more than just enforcing the rules and protecting things.
Okay. What else is there?
There's this whole other side to him, this idea of El Pombero as a protector, even a provider.
Really? Okay, now this is interesting. So we've got El Pombero, this enforcer, this trickster, but then also this protector, this provider even. That's a lot, honestly. For one, what did you call him? Nature spirit.
Right. It's kind of a wild mix. We want to put these nature spirits in a box, right?
Right.
Either they're like all good or all bad. But El Pombero, he doesn't really fit neatly anywhere, does he? And that's what I think is so cool about looking at this through the Guarani worldview. It adds this whole other layer.
Okay, so what is it about the Guarani view then that changes how we think about El Pombero? How does he go from this, I don't know, boogeyman figure to someone you'd actually want on your good side?
Well, a lot of it comes down to respect.
Yeah.
And this idea of reciprocity, like
Yeah.
you give and you get back, right?
Yeah.
And we actually see that a lot in these sources you sent with all the offerings people leave for El Pombero.
Oh, right.
Tobacco, honey, even like cane liquor.
Yeah. And there was that one video, I think it was on YouTube, where you see this farmer, right? He's leaving a little bag of, well, they didn't show it out, right? But it was pretty clearly
Yeah.
something El Pombero might appreciate.
Let's just say a certain kind of herb that's popular in those parts.
Exactly. But it just struck me as so interesting, like this whole idea of, I don't know, almost like paying your dues to nature, you know?
Yeah, it's like an offering, a way to appease him.
Right.
Right. But it's more than just trying to avoid getting on his bad side.
Okay, so there's more to it.
It's about acknowledging that we're not separate from nature.
Yeah.
We're part of this exchange. You give to the forest, the land, you take care of it, and it gives back to you. And El Pombero, he's like the representation of all that. So if you understand that, if you're living right, he can actually bring you protection, even abundance, some people believe.
So instead of fearing him, it's more about being in harmony with him.
Exactly.
So if you're on El Pombero's good side, you might find a little gift on your doorstep instead of, say, your chicken's missing.
Exactly. There are all these stories about El Pombero, about how he'll bless your harvest, keep the pests away, or even guide you if you're lost. But, and this is important, only if you're showing respect, if you get it, you know?
That's fascinating. It's such a different way of looking at our relationship with the natural world than what a lot of us are used to.
It really is. Like, we're not above it, we're a part of it, and our actions, they have an impact, good or bad.
It's kind of a powerful message, especially now with everything going on, climate change and all that. It's almost like El Pombero, this figure from, what, hundreds, thousands of years ago, is speaking to us today.
And that's the thing about these stories, right? They speak to something deeper. So yeah, we've got El Pombero in South America, but you see similar ideas everywhere. The Kodama in Japan, even just like the idea of Mother Nature, it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
Respect for the natural world, it matters.
And ignoring it, well, there might be consequences.
Yeah.
And I guess that brings us back to that darker side of El Pombero, right? We can't just gloss over those stories of people disappearing. Those are out there,
Yeah.
and they're pretty unsettling, to say the least.
You're right. And this is where I think we need to maybe make a distinction.
Mhm.
Like, are we talking about El Pombero literally snatching people up? Or are we talking about him as this, I don't know, this representation of what happens when we don't respect the balance of things?
It's like, does it even matter at that point? It's the story, right? The message behind it.
Right. And the message is powerful. It's about recognizing that we're part of something so much bigger, and there are these forces at play that honestly we might not fully understand.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
Maybe by trying to understand them, those forces, by respecting that balance, we can, I don't know, figure out how to exist in this world a little better. But that's a whole other conversation probably.
I gotta say, this deep dive has been wild. Like, we started with spooky stories, you know, the El Pombero of legends, and now here we are talking about, like, the whole of nature, how we treat the planet. It's a lot.
It's deeper than it looks, right?
Yeah.
These stories, they always have these layers.
Yeah, and I think it would have been easy to just stick with, like, El Pombero's the monster in your closet kind of thing, but we're seeing there's this whole other side. Respect, taking responsibility, even something kind of spiritual about how we fit in with nature.
Exactly. It's like encoded, you know what I mean? Those deeper meanings, they're woven right into the folklore. You've got the scary stuff
Yeah.
to get your attention, sure. But then, boom, this whole other message about how we're supposed to be living.
Like a life lesson disguised as a horror story.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot, right? El Pombero, the trickster, protector, enforcer. But if we had to break it down, like, what's the one thing you hope people really take away from all this?
That's a good question. I think, for me, the biggest takeaway from El Pombero is simple. Our actions, they have consequences. It's like we can choose to respect the natural world, you know, think about how we impact things, or we can ignore it. But El Pombero, he's like this reminder that either way, there's going to be some kind of reaction.
Like a cosmic balancing of the scales.
Yeah, exactly. And whether you believe in him literally or you see him as more of a symbol, that part's up to you. But that underlying idea, it's universal, right?
Right, that we're all connected. Like, we're part of this massive ecosystem, not above it. It's a lot bigger than just us.
And maybe, just maybe, if we start paying attention to those stories, to what they're really trying to tell us, we can learn to live in a way that works, you know, a way that respects the balance.
Maybe even get a little gift from El Pombero while we're at it.
You never know.
But on a serious note, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
And it makes you wonder, what other monsters are out there just waiting for us to dig a little deeper? Their stories, their warnings, what can they teach us?
Oh, I'm sure there are countless stories just like El Pombero's, each one a piece of how we understand ourselves and our place in the world. But that's a conversation for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Until then, keep exploring those myths and legends, and maybe, just maybe, pay attention to the whispers of the world around you. You never know what you might learn. Thanks for coming along on this deep dive with us.